very bad at awkward silences as well. But good afternoon, and thank you all very much for coming to this Fringe. Small but perfectly formed. I know that you've got a lot of choice, so really do appreciate everyone that has come along this afternoon. There is sandwiches, tea, coffee, water, so please, throughout, feel free to kind of help yourself. And just make sure you've got what you need. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming along to this Fringe, which is working wonders through rural employment support in tackling child poverty. So my name is Philip White, and I'm director of the independent think tank, the Institute for Public Policy Research in Scotland. I'm delighted to have got a fantastic panel who are far more expert than me in lots of this, and be able to kind of talk to you and chat through kind of the things that we want to discuss today. So I will start at the end. We've got Laura Miller, who is Strategic Manager of Fife Gingerbread, Emma Roddick, MSP, delighted to have you with us, who is Scottish Government Equalities Minister, and finally Fiona Jones from the not-for-profit employment services provider FedCap. So we'll hear from each of the speakers in turn, but I thought I would just kind of kick off, and then I think most importantly there'll be an opportunity once we've all spoken to hear your thoughts and kind of just have an open discussion. But I thought I would kick off just by giving a bit of background and context, which is very much like the child poverty element of that title is potentially the most important thing. So we know that the Scottish Government has made some really strong commitments around child poverty, not least when the UK Government scrapped their own UK-wide child poverty targets. The Scottish Government immediately stepped in to legislate for child poverty reduction targets in Scotland. Those targets are incredibly stretching and really ambitious, but at least, if nothing else, as a marker of intent and ambition, they are incredibly important. However, as we know, child poverty is remaining stubbornly persistent in Scotland, as it is across the UK, and so we've still got a huge distance to travel in meeting those targets. To date, most of the heavy lifting, for want of a better term, in meeting those child poverty targets has been done by social security, not least the incredibly important Scottish Child Payment, which is actively working to lift tens of thousands of children out of poverty. So things like that, and we know that cash transfers are one of the quickest and most direct ways to lift children out of poverty and families out of poverty. So those are incredibly important, but we also know, and we need to be honest, that social security is important and it's done the heavy lifting so far, but it cannot do everything. Unless you're willing to literally put billions of pounds into the Scottish Child Payment and increase it, up to potentially upwards of £100 a week. So other things need to step in and do as much of the hard work as Social Security does. And one of the most enduring ways, obviously, that we can help to lift families out of poverty is through helping them get into work, and then once they're there, ensuring that that work is secure and well paid. And the stats speak for themselves. So, across Scotland, 24% of children are living in poverty. But just to throw a couple of numbers, and I'm not going to do too many statistics, I promise today. If you consider a couple where one parent is in full-time work and one parent is in part-time work, 4% of children are living in poverty. You then bring that up to where there's only part-time work in a household, so that increases to 47% of children living in poverty. And where a household is inactive or retired, that increases again to 58%. So again, you can see the really important role of work. But as I say, the important thing is not just getting children into work, it's ensuring that that is well paid and secure. So perhaps one of the most damning statistics of all is the fact that, while obviously work is incredibly important, 2/3 of children living in poverty are in a household where at least one person is in work. So we know that far too many households and far too many parents are still getting trapped in low pay and insecure work. So it is incredibly important. So what can be done? I think there's three things primarily for us. So first is delivery and investment at the right scale. So again, the Scottish Government's putting significant money and has put significant targets on its employability programmes like No One Left Behind and First Start Scotland, in terms of the numbers of parents that it wants to help get into work. But again, we know that probably the scale isn't quite there yet to have the full impact at once. There's an offer which provides meaningful opportunities for parents. So again, ensuring that those outcomes for parents are secure and long term. And then finally, the wider infrastructure is incredibly important. I'm sure that probably others in the panel will talk about this, not least things like childcare. And then finally, and I think the context in which IPPR in particular is really interested to look at this, there is the question of powers. So at the end of the day, the steps the Scottish Government are taking around employment are incredibly important. But if you look at the numbers of people that are accessing devolved programmes like No One Left Behind and First Start Scotland, they are a tiny fraction of the overall numbers of people that are accessing some kind of employment support, and that is more often than not through a reserved Job Centre Plus. And the evidence is clear. Job centres are failing parents and failing individuals. They're left at the whims of really punitive conditionality and sanctions. We know, and certainly from speaking to parents at Fife Gingerbread supports, too often parents that are accessing a job centre feel like nothing more than a number and a target, rather than being someone that's being invested in and someone that there's actually a genuine chance or a genuine attempt to try and secure them a better outcome. And finally, people through job centres being put into any job. So again, it's not about having a secure, well-paid job. As far as kind of that reserve system is concerned, any job is a good job, whereas again, we know that that is not true. And all of the evidence and all of the research shows that while conditionality might have the effect of helping to get people into work, too often that is very insecure and they're at huge risk of falling right back out of the marketplace or the kind of the job market because that job is so insecure or just not suited to them. So I think there's a real question of powers and a real question of where responsibility for delivering those employment services should sit if you want to be able to secure a genuinely kind of holistic system that is able to kind of best support those parents that are living in poverty right now, and more importantly than anything, to be able to deliver a system at scale that can help to reach those child poverty targets. So that was probably more context and background from me that you needed, but thank you for indulging me. But I think most importantly is to hear from our speakers here today. So first, on behalf of the government, would like to welcome again Emma Roddick, MSP, to give some thoughts.
Thank you, Philip, and yeah, hello everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here to be talking about a subject that's really important to me. I'll just share a bit of background so you know where I'm coming from. My father died when I was really young, so I grew up in a one-parent household, which, as if you're in this room, you'll probably know is quite a difficult position for my mother to have been in with two young girls. She worked, but she struggled. And we were her young carers, so when she went into hospital, we struggled as well. And I saw myself the toll that working in that environment took on my mother, but I also know personally the impact that it has on children to be growing up in that situation. So that makes me really proud and excited to be a member of a government which is doing so much to tackle child poverty. I mean, if you look at the SNP's communications output, which I'm sure all of you do, apart from independence, I think the one thing we talk most about now is tackling child poverty. And coming through the Social Justice Social Security Committee, we did a lot of work into the link between parental employment and child poverty. And so seeing the impact of that, getting that information from constituents, from witnesses to our inquiry, was really important to me to then be able to come into this role and help do the work, help to roll out the Scottish Child Payment, which is now increased to £25 for each eligible child, and to see not only the legacy of Nicola Sturgeon's government in bringing that in and setting these, yes, very ambitious targets, but why would you set targets that you know you can easily reach? We should be putting ambitious targets in place, but also to see Hamza come in as the new First Minister and really run with it straight away, talking about childcare, about opportunities for parents. Because to me, opportunity is about choice. Not everyone can work. Not everyone wants to work, not everybody can work 9 to 5 without adjustments or support, but everyone should have access to that support that they need to work the hours that they can and want to work, if that's the situation they're in. And nobody, in work or not, should be forced into poverty. So yeah, Social Security is absolutely doing the heavy lifting at the moment, but we are investing in employability services, 108 million over the next year. And I think that's a really important marker of where our priorities sit, because we don't have all the powers. We don't have the powers to support people with the cliff edge that tying these benefits to reserved ones creates for people. We can't do away with universal credit sanctions yet, but we are doing what we can, and I think, well, I hope that that's coming through loud and clear for all of you, and I look forward to a really good discussion on the policy.
Thank you very much. Laura?
I'll refer to my notes, otherwise I'll blather and talk for more than my approximate 5 minutes. I'm Laura from Fife Gingerbread. So we're a wee children and families charity just in the Fife area. So we work with about between 700 and 800 families every year in Fife, so we deliver a range of support, and that does include employability, which we're talking about today. So all the families that we're supporting with are facing really complex and multiple barriers. Most of it is grounded in poverty, trauma and poor mental health. That all came through from a recent survey that we did with families. And it's not an accident or an unfortunate coincidence that poverty, trauma and mental health are so intrinsically connected in our experience. So there's no quick fixes and easy solutions to it. So in the organisation there's loads of responses to mitigating the impact of poverty for families. Some are short term, but the longer term one where we've invested quite a lot of our time and energy and resources, it's quite a wee organisation, is the potential that work has to play in tackling child poverty. So we really believe that work has a much greater role to play and can make a much greater contribution to tackling child poverty. I'm going to caveat, just touching on something that you said, what I'm about to say, by saying that it's really important we don't oversimplify this to being just about getting parents jobs. I remember being in an organisation and hearing the phrase any job, better job, career, which I really believe if we're really aiming for any job for people, we're absolutely complicit in driving that worrying growth in work poverty, and actually we are accountable then for people being trapped in that persistent low pay that we see and that the recent GRF Poverty in Scotland report really highlighted for us all. So I'm going to share a little bit about what we do at Fife Gingerbread, which I hope is helpful. So in terms of employability, making it work for lone parents is funded through the employability pathway in Fife and some of the funding that Emma and Philip have touched on. It celebrated its 10th birthday this year, which was lovely. And the support is really about supporting parents on their journey towards employment. And there's loads of activities that are available to families. But I think something really important about what we do is that the service is person-led and it's not service-led. So what I mean by that is employability projects all too often are driven by the funding and this obsession with counting job outputs. And what that leads to is projects that are designed not to meet the needs of the families, but to meet the needs of the service itself. So what we're really focused on doing, and what I'm really proud of at Fife Gingerbread, is that we enable families to improve their lives. And that may or may not include work, and that's okay. So really being a service, a person-led service, is really important to us. And we've remained a specialist service, so we only, on that project, we only work with lone parent families. And what that means is that we really can understand the really complex barriers and needs, all the really difficult intersectional challenges that exist for parents and all those structural inequalities that that group of families face. And I observe a lot of employability provision, which is universal. I'm a really firm advocate that if we want to shift the dial on child poverty and we want to use parental employment as a way to do that, that we really need targeted investment of the money that is available. So rather than these universal services where we hope there'll be a bit of a trickle-down effect, and fingers crossed that will pull some parents out of poverty. So we know that being out of work significantly increases the likelihood of families surviving poverty. So I think my ask is we've learned a lot, we've evaluated our approach, and we know that specialist targeted support for lone parent families does work well in terms of employability. In terms of work then, lone parents are this incredible pool of talent. Like, I'm always amazed by all the parents that I meet and all the skills and the resilience that they have. But entering the labour market is really challenging for lone parent families for lots of reasons. So our board is a wee charity, they were really brave, and we invested in bringing on a project coordinator, and that coordinator is leading an initiative that we've called Lone Parents, Poverty and Work. So what we're trying to do is test a slightly different approach to employee engagement, and our aspirations through that project is that we can single parent proof workplaces in Fife and really enable this really key child poverty priority group to enter the workplace and sustain that and be better off because of it. So our aspirations were to flip the responsibility. So often in employability and recruitment, we say, you're the lone parent, so you need to be more skilled and more flexible, and you need to be more ready for work. But actually, what if we work with employers and we said, how can you be more ready to recruit lone parents, and how can you be more flexible and more skilled at how you support those lone parents? So that's quite a challenging change of mindset for employers, and our hopes are that we can support employers to better understand child poverty. A lot of the workplaces we're meeting maybe see child poverty as something that's for councils or governments or wee charities like us to solve, and it's not. It's a responsibility for all of us as communities. So we really want to work with employers to change that trajectory for families. But I think for us, what we found in our experience on a really practical level, at local level, is that it's not about policies, it's actually about winning the hearts and minds of employers, and that really local approach that's making a big difference, and working with employers to see, do they understand the significant increase in risk around poverty for their staff who have kids. So the project's been underway for about a year and a half. We've had some really nice successes with it coming through. So, for example, we've got some areas of Fife Council guaranteeing interviews for lone parents that we're working with. We've just launched a new lone parent traineeship programme, which I'm really proud of. We work with some care homes, an industrial paint spraying firm, and what they've done is different things. They've created term time, school hours roles. So they're trying something different, and it's working for them. And most importantly, it's working for the parents and their kids who are moving into those jobs. So we also challenged ourselves, so we realised we needed to do better at Fife Gingerbread, so we ring-fenced jobs for lone parents that we were working with and changed our processes as well, so it's not all about looking outward, we've done stuff internally differently. So I think that what we're doing and what I'm really proud of is that we're pulling different policy areas that we talk about, fair work and community wealth building, but we're actually putting it into practice. And I think that all over Scotland, what I see is loads of organisations like us, this is not unique what I'm sharing at Fife Gingerbread, doing really great work and testing lots of great approaches. What we seem unable to do is pull that together into a change that changes the whole system for families, much broader than that localised approach, which touches on that sort of spread and scale that you were talking about, Philip. So that's what we're doing at Fife Gingerbread.
Thank you very much. And then last but not least, sorry, I almost cut off your, almost cut off your applause there. Last but not least, Fiona.
Hi everybody, so I'm Fiona Jones and I've worked in education and employability for about 20 years now. I started out working with lone parents in some of the most deprived areas of South and East London. I work for FedCap as head of partnerships, and we're a group of not-for-profit companies working across the UK, America and Canada. And we've got 90 years of experience about working with people around economic well-being. But what we do here in Scotland, through FedCap Scotland, is that we have been working for the last 4 years to invest more than 12 million in projects in Scotland, in the company, to ensure that through our partnership with the Lennox Partnership, delivering Fair Start Scotland, we are impacting on the lives of people trying to move into employment in Scotland. We know Fair Start has delivered 20,000 plus people into work in Scotland, which is fantastic. 40% of those have been delivered by FedCap. And of our customer group who are going into work, around 20% of those are parents, both lone parents and parents. And what I really want to do, we've heard some of the amazing things that are going on in local areas and some of the trials and tribulations, but I wanted to give a voice to some of the customers on our programs and some of the people that we work with and some of the difference that it's made to people's lives, being able to get this support. I want to touch a bit about Eileen. So Eileen came to our program in the Fife area, and she was pretty broken when she came to us. She'd been told she was never going to succeed. She was one of those people who went to the job centre and just felt like a number, like nobody cared, nobody was going to help her. And her son came into the office with her, and all she wanted to do was give him a better life. It was about what she could do as a parent and how she wanted to move him forward. She wasn't eating because she was making sure that he got to eat. And that was the choice that she was having to make. And we worked with her to help build up that confidence, to make her feel like she could achieve, to be able to get that support in place for her and for her family, for her child, to move her forward. We put her onto training programs, we helped her access support in the local area, link up with community organisations who could provide additional training. And when she moved into employment, because of the links that we put in place with the local community, with the kind of collaborations, her confidence was huge, and her belief in herself, but also her son's belief in her, and her pride at being able to come into the office and talk about how now she was going to be able to buy him new trainers that he'd always wanted, and she'd never been able to buy new trainers for him before. But thanks to that job, that changed her life, and it changed the way that her child saw her, which just, what an amazing thing for a person to experience. And when we look at Eileen's example, not only did she change her life and her child's life, she changed her communities, because her confidence was so high now. She went around to local supermarkets and convinced them to donate fruit and vegetables that she took around to local primary schools and ran sessions in local primary schools on healthy eating. And that was something she would never have had the confidence to do if she hadn't been through the programme, if she hadn't had that support. And for Eileen, she's a real success story. Most of our data, and a lot of the national data, you mentioned the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the data says that lone parents particularly, but parents in general, will end up in lower paid, more insecure work, because they will make those choices to just get that work, get a job, get some money coming in, and prioritise that immediate participation over progression. But what we do when we work with customers through their in-work support is looking at progression as well. It's personalised to them. What is their journey? Where do they want to go? So for Eileen, she wanted to have that progression, and we enabled her to not just get that initial job, but to progress into a higher paid, better job, and now she's being awarded internal prizes for being the best salesperson in her region of Scotland as part of her role. And you know, how fantastic is that for her and for her son and her family. So these are the stories that for us are so important, because this is what makes that role of the employability support, of those programs, impact on people's lives. And when we look at where things are going as we move forward, our concern, I think, looking at that pathway through funding, through infrastructure, how can we ensure that services remain person-centred, that the funding incentivises programs that look at that individual and help them achieve what they want to achieve? How do we ensure that future services and programs are going to actually facilitate those things? We know that Fair Start Scotland, which has been working, is going to cease referrals from March of next year. No One Left Behind is coming in on the back of that, but have we got guarantees that we're going to see consistency of service across all of Scotland, and everybody will get that same level of services? That employers who are vital, who we need providing inclusive workplaces, that they will get that same support in every single 32 local authority areas across Scotland, with no national consistency being guaranteed. So really key that we see that ongoing support maintained, that the funding is there to underpin that and ensure that that support is looking at people and their lives, thinking about Eileen's journey and making sure that every Eileen across Scotland has access to that. So ultimately, you know, organisations like ours, we exist to create opportunities for people that give them choices. And at the end of the day, we believe really passionately that good work remains the way out of poverty. and the way into healthier and happier lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. So yeah, hopefully that gave a kind of useful introduction kind of across the piece, you know, in terms of those local programmes, government position, what it means to actual individuals and people and families. So hopefully you find those remarks interesting, kind of spark some of your own thoughts. But now, yeah, I'm just going to check the time. I think probably got about half an hour, 25 minutes or so. For just a bit of an open discussion. If you want to ask questions of any of the panel, make any points, then please, this is your opportunity. I'm going to go to the back first, and then, yeah.
Hi there, I'm a counsellor over in Ayrshire, and I'm going to be biased and say that we have a really good employability program. However, the future proofing, I think there was just a couple of key sort of consistent points across the board for everyone that I would just like to know the opinion of the panel. Capitalism, how do we defeat it in terms of moving it forward so that you know, big companies, how do you get them on board? It's great that there are some employers out there that are signing up, but how do we get that incentivising aspect there? Obviously, a well-being economy, like everything that you're saying just chimes to me with everything that is a priority, and I'm glad that as a party that is where our priority is at, and as a government, we're seeing up in the Scottish Government. And we've been a local council, I can't help but say that for me, I've always said that if we want to deliver independence for Scotland, I appreciate that you are seeing it from a different perspective, but for the audience in the room, that's something that's about how do we deliver that, and why is it that independence is important to Scotland is because it has to be that Scotland has more to offer in defeating child poverty and everything else that goes with that. For me, it has to be that the core is that it delivers locally, it has to be in that sphere of local government, and I heard what you're saying about the inconsistencies. You're absolutely correct, so it'd be interesting to know how do you see that consistency happening, and how do we deal with the culture war of it as well. I work in the NHS and I work in a really deprived area of Glasgow, and there's an internal culture there that is really, really difficult to crack. So even though you get a couple of people who might come through it and manage to assist and help them get that better place in that time, sometimes they can fall backwards because there isn't infrastructure with projects that are doing that work. And how do we support local government to ensure that that funding is consistently there, because we are all facing really, really difficult times in local government as well.
Thank you. Maybe look to Laura and Fiona first on that point about kind of the localism, because I think there is a tension in lots of this of we know that local programmes work and they're really important. Quite often at a local level you know the people in your area, but does that create a tension? I think as Fiona said, how do you ensure that how do you ensure that you don't get a postcode lottery and you've got some kind of national consistency? I don't know if we want to come in there, and then Emma, can we bring you in on how do we defeat capitalism?
Yeah.
It's a very good point.
I think speaking on the consistency piece, it is a big concern for us, and we do see it. We work across a lot of different areas. We're in 12 local authority areas across Scotland, and so we know in some areas there are fantastic local teams doing some really great stuff, but we also know that we're seeing pots of money that are short term because you haven't got those 3-5 year timeframes to be able to work with. And it's really difficult to design employability programs that are only going to be short term because some people need longer. They need, as Gingerbread talk about, that idea of let's look at what that family needs, put that support in place, take people on that journey, help them move forward. So there has to be a move towards, and whether that's going to come from government or whether that's going to come from local government or whether that's going to come from the third sector, there has to be some length of time for these programs to run, and it has to be designed in a way that is going to guarantee support over time for people, that is going to address what they need to have in place. And I know that local government is caught in a bit of a rock and a hard place on that. But what Fair Start has achieved has been that. It's been over a longer period of time. It's guaranteed that people will get a person-centred service, which is vital. So I think there's always that pushback again to say, can you guarantee that from a local government perspective as well?
I probably have a slightly different perspective, which is maybe helpful because I'm coming at it from a very local perspective. But I said it when I was speaking, but I'm a really firm advocate that local organisations like Fife Gingerbread, we only work in Fife, so we know our communities as in who we're trying to help, but we know what else is available, and because we're very localised, we what we can do, and I hope I kind of demonstrated that, was we can start to work out how we can connect all the dots because we are local. So I could see that there's stuff happening around progressive recruitment in Fife Council under the community wealth building because I'm local, so I was able to work out how do I get in there to make that happen and support that to benefit the families that we're working with. So I do have a really firm belief that local support has a really important role to play, and that we really are in a better position to understand our local areas because of that. I'm also not, I think I may be touching it, but I do think that often what we have is these big pots of money and we're trying to spread them out, and actually that's what leads to that bit of like trickle down effect. So we've had a little uplift in funding through the parental employment money, and what we've done is said, there's the 3 wards in Fife with the highest rates of child poverty, where it's 1 in 3. Let's put the money there. So I've not tried to spread the resource all over Fife so that it's like all in all the areas. We've done it's even more targeted than that to try and have a big impact with the limited funds that we've got. So I think that, you know, we've gone local and then we've gone even more local, and I think that, you know, we're going to test that approach, but we're already kind of seeing that trickle effect where you're really working at that neighbourhood level, which you'll be really familiar with in your role. And I think we need to single parent-proof workplaces. You talked about how do we embed it so that if a service like Fife Gingerbread doesn't exist anymore, it's there. And that for me is how we could do it. If we can work with employers to single parent-proof the workplace, then actually, whether me and the staff are there or not, that should still continue, if that makes sense.
Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the easy question, Michelle. How we end capitalism? You know, for me, my part, I'm working on it. I think, you know, I always used to think it was a matter of grabbing a megaphone and shouting on high streets, but actually, it's progress takes a lot more time. But I think what we've seen since Hamza became First Minister is a move away from a Cabinet Secretary for the economy. We've got a Cabinet Secretary for the wellbeing economy. And that focus is so vital if we want to undo the historic systemic inequalities that have been built into the system because of capitalism. And it goes back to, you know, what both Laura and Fiona have been saying about work has to be fair, it has to be well paying for it to be worthwhile in terms of tackling poverty for people to be in it. It's not a matter of, okay, we recognise that there are inequalities in the system, so let's just keep pushing people into it. That's not going to fix any of these issues. But that's why we have a focus in government on that fair work. Just to quickly address your points around local government, I completely sympathise, and I think all of this is an argument for independence, because we look at how limited the Scottish Government is around social security, around having to, like I said, tie benefits to reserved ones and creating that cliff edge that we don't have a control over, unfortunately. And I think looking at not only what could we do if we were an independent country as a government, but what could then be devolved further down to local government level is a really persuasive argument, I find, particularly in areas like Highlands and Islands where I represent. It's about giving more power to the communities that know how to use it, and supporting local initiatives, yes, backed up by national funding and national policy and direction and strategy, but recognising that local people know what works best in their area. One area might really struggle with childcare, one might be transport, one might be, you know, monopoly on employers. So it's completely different issues in different areas, and we should be able to strengthen that relationship and work better.
I think there's a triangle of questions here, so 1, 2, 3, and we'll try and do all 3 and see how that goes.
I was coming into that from the background, I know you're aware of this, Emma, particularly with our rural communities like Shetland or near the Western Isles, but how do we actually start tackling the ability where it's either access to work or particularly around transport? I'm thinking of, let's take Shetland for example, you live 20 to 30 miles from working standards, you live in Arts, the job centre bus tend to put low skilled lone parents towards reflect on ours tend to be things like working in Tesco. If you don't have a car and you live 40 miles from work, you're building in immediately back to in-work poverty. As soon as the first thing you have to do to get a job is go buy a car. If the systems aren't in place or we cannot get the jobs more locally to the people, you're just creating in-work poverty. So what solutions can we do without having to put it straight back to the council where we don't have the powers? For example, free bus travel might be a solution, but you need to run several buses away that fitted around the school and not just the one at in for 9 and one at 5 that our communities currently have.
Yep, completely agree, Susie from Save the Children, completely agree that employment has a really important role to play in tackling child poverty, and also agree with what you said at the beginning that, sorry, completely lost my train of thought, I won't come back to that, but agree that in the next kind of strategy period for tackling child poverty, we need to move into employment and looking at that because we have already invested so much in social security. One of the worries that I have is that in Save the Children just now we were putting a focus on poverty and families with a baby under 1, who's a priority group, for many reasons, but also because the impacts of poverty are the most acute at that age and the most lasting. So there's an argument to be made for focus and investment there. So but sometimes I worry that when the narrative shifts towards employment, we can forget about those families who should have the choice to stay at home if they think that's best for their child and their child's development. So what do people think about how do we mitigate against that, about some families being forgotten about because we're talking about employment, but also believe Save the Children doesn't take as a position on whether a parent should or should not go to work. It should be their choice, and sometimes it's best that they go to work and sometimes it's best that they stay at home. So I have a question specifically for Emma. Do you have any more information about the pilot? I think it is about increasing childcare to eligible families after maternity leave. I think it was in used as programme for government and just going to be piloted in some areas, but it was quite low on detail, but I think we called for something very similar, so keen to hear if there's any more information on that.
Thank you. And then
Yes, I'm Tom McHugh, a councillor in Perth and Kinross. When we came into administration, we put child poverty in our corporate plan. We set up a poverty task force. They identified employability as one of the main key factors for that. So we then spoke to our council officers, where's the problems, where's this system not working, and it's the funding not being consistent and reliable. So they asked us to give them consistent funding, so we did that in our budget. We gave them 300 grand of recurrent funding to employ a team, to provide that one-to-one support, and to build up these connections with the third sector, with other bodies, to do it. So it's about that they can then employ somebody, and that person taking on that role and that job knows the money's there next year for their job to continue, and the work that they do has somewhere else to go. It's not a stop-start process that might not go anywhere because the funding will disappear. And as other councils have said, these are hard decisions for councils to have to make. But again, we put child poverty in our corporate plan. It's there, it's what we're there to do. It's what the Tory administration before us didn't do. So it's what we're going to stand on and fight for. But it is that consistency of funding to keep that service going. The housing service has its funding, the criminal justice team has its funding, but things can go forward and projects can be taken forward and these partnerships and interworking can happen. And I think the child poverty needs that consistency in funding to allow that same system to develop and the same relationships and working together to happen.
thank you. We're going to come back in first on the kind of local authorities and then to the under ones.
Absolutely, and Zara, I completely get the issue there, and I think it's an interesting argument around what services should be working for people and under the control of the council. I know that's a big debate in Shetland at the moment, is do we even want a council and transport company, because it's so political, but when you are relying on private companies doing local bus routes, which I do as well at home, it does create that conflict between what people actually need and what's profitable. Again, going back to that same problem. But I think in terms of low paying employers, there are employers in Shetland and across Scotland, but I'm thinking of a few in Shetland who have managed to make their workplaces flexible. I was at the soap company recently, and the lassie there was telling me she comes every day from Walsa, and they work the shifts around her, and she gets the support to work. So I think we talk more about what good employers are doing and promote them and support them, and hope that, you know, not forcing people to take the lower paid unfair work will end up with a fair
Coming in there, I do think that's important, because I do know in Sheffield so many businesses, particularly in hospitality, are saying they can't get staff, but they don't seem to make it
Yeah.
up an effort in making them flexible.
Maybe it'll click at some point that there's a reason you're not getting staff at the moment. In terms of families being forgotten about and the choice to work, I think that is important. It's exactly what I was trying to get at earlier, is people can't always work, and people can't always work as much as they'd like to, whether it's a physical limitation or caring responsibilities. But it is about making sure that we're not leaving people behind, and whether they're in work or not, nobody should be in poverty. Work should be something that is available to people, and that they're supported to do, but it shouldn't be a condition for, you know, being able to have warmth and food. In terms of the childcare update, I don't have anything more than what's in the programme for government at the moment, but I can catch you afterwards and try and get you some more information. In terms of consistency in funding, just really quickly, I wish the Scottish Government had consistency in funding. You know, I a couple of years ago asked a more senior colleague, you know, our budget seems to have changed like 3 times this year, is that normal? And he says, well, it is now. And it's not just the inconsistency in messaging coming from the UK government, but it's the inflation that we're seeing for capital spend, it's the inflation in pay and everything, and it's getting more and more difficult to budget for all of these different things.
Can I just come in on that point? I know Emma's worked, she's been a counsellor, so she understands my point on this one. I think something that would be helpful to us as counsellors is that the ring fencing and some of the malleability around that, if there isn't an ability to change the baseline in terms of the amount that's there, because like you said, you can't help if the puppet masters don't give you enough money from Westminster. However, I think what would be really helpful to us in local government is, rather than council officers having to meet a certain criteria and then not being able to meet a certain criteria, for example, we have great organisations who are able to flex. If that could also be reflected in some of the actions in government, and I know there are some funds that do that already, it's not a slam, it's just a back thought just to consider when it comes to making these decisions. And I appreciate there are a lot of difficult decisions even in the Scottish Government at this moment in time, that there is flexibility applied to some of those ring fences, so that it gives the flexibility for local organisations to tap into those funds.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I'm a former councillor, and I have actually been quite excited, because I'm not one of those former councillors who now just hates council. I think council is brilliant, and seeing the Verity House agreement and that switch towards, you know, local by default, national by agreement, I think is really exciting, and the doing away with, you know, unnecessary ring fencing. And there is always a balance, because you don't want to leave, you know, child poverty in the hands of Tory councils and have people be in this postcode lottery situation, but councils should have that breadth of ability to tackle things in their own way.
I just do abuse my position as chair, because it's really important one to come in on, because it covers off both points, because totally get the volatility, but certainly I'm sure Fiona and Laura have seen this, you know, talk to service providers. So for example, this year, no one left behind funding posts for local authorities weren't confirmed until early summer. That meant that by the time local authorities are commissioning services, it's almost the end of the year. And we've spoken to a couple, so not to name names, because obviously it's very confidential, you know, some have taken huge risk in that they started to commission services before the start of the financial year, but if the money hadn't followed through, that would have been a huge financial risk on them. So there is volatility, but I think it's exactly that point of, because if you take some people that both Fiona and Laura will work with, some of the furthest people away from the labour market, so a 1-year programme is not going to cut it for a lot of them. They require 2 years, 3 years of quite intensive support. But if you've got funding settlements that aren't being confirmed until halfway through a financial year, by the time you commission services, you've lost at least half a year, if not more than that, and then immediately that just creates that volatility for people going on to programmes. So there's definitely something that needs to give there, and it's a really important one, I think, for everyone to kind of bear in mind of how we do start to get that scale and certainty of funding, so we can be assured of services, because ultimately it's the people that are being served, they're the ones that will lose out with that volatility. But I think I saw a hand over here, and then I'm conscious that my eyes have been over here most of the day. So we've got another couple, so maybe take back rows, I'll come back to you. So we've got here and then here, and the two of you together, yeah, and then we'll come back for the rest just now. So.
So Claire, at Wallace branch, actually Susie had asked something about the issues I was thinking about in terms of parents of younger children who may choose not to for whatever reason get to work. And mine is, I suppose, as a single parent and as a primary teacher, I didn't have the issue I'm about to raise with you, but when you look at our sort of Nordic neighbours and the infrastructures that they have in place at the local government in terms of childcare arrangements, not just for term time, you mentioned employers and term time, being flexible, particularly to single parents. I think we have such a great infrastructure, and I've been frustrated both as a parent and I work in higher education, but looking at the resources that we have, but which we're not able to use either at local government level or to help parents during summer times, because those are huge, they're very stressful. 6 weeks, 7 weeks, however long you've got, and if you're working and your employer isn't sensitive to those needs, then how do you manage it? So, okay, what can we do?
I'm now retired, but I used to be a reporter to the children's panel, so I used to see it at the cold face, what child poverty did to children. And thereafter I worked as a trainer in child protections from that base. I want to project you into the future. We're not now, we're in a free and independent Scotland. What holistic overview do you have for tackling child poverty in relation to employment if you had the magic wand and we were 1 year in the future where we get independence?
Love it. Not difficult at all. So I'm going to put someone else in the spot for that, and then.
I kind of prefer being 6 years in the future in Scotland, but I'm a councillor down in Everclyde, and I just need to say in terms of Verity House, and I can't believe I'm saying this, you kind of need to trust the Tory councils. If we're really serious about local by default, national by agreement, then you have to trust them, because they're still elected by the people of their areas and still know they can't believe I'm saying this, and I don't mean it generally, but you know, everybody gets the point I'm making. I want my area, Inverclyde, which has got the single most deprived data zone in the whole of Scotland, has got 25% child poverty rates to absolutely thrive and be able to deal with things. But I think we know better in Inverclyde, even under a Labour administration, what the solutions are for Inverclyde than other people who don't maybe have the same depopulation issues, they don't have the deprivation issues that we have. You've got areas of Scotland that are burgeoning, that are thriving already, that have got so many people they don't know what to do, and we're not in that position, and we need to have the flexibility in Inverclyde to be able to do what is going to work for our area. And even though we're in a Labour administration, we still need that. We need that to be there, and some flexibility on our fencing is important, I think, because what's happening in our area is completely different from what's happening in the Midlothians and the Edinburghs and the Glasgows and the Dundees. It's just a completely different context. But I think also in terms of what we're talking about in terms of child poverty, we just need to be absolutely stubborn on this and not move on to something else that's sexy in a wee while. You know, we need to kind of absolutely be utterly stubborn and say we're doing this, and we're doing it for the full generation. If we need to stuff electoral cycles, what am I doing? How did I get elected? I don't know how I got elected when I'm saying trust the Tories and stuff electoral cycles, but we kind of just need to get on and keep at it and not move on to the next sexy thing, because it's the only way we're really going to make the changes that we need to see, and we just need to make some tough decisions in doing it.
Rob, moving in on the first point, particularly because I know that you'll work with lots of parents that are in exactly facing some of those situations, and I'll bring everyone in for the get ready for your what is the 6 years from now magic bullet.
I think the infrastructure bits are really challenging. Do you know, there was the big announcement, like, do you know, this 11:40 childcare hours came out and everyone was really excited, then we go, actually it's not working in reality on the ground for parents. So, and I think that's, like, I'll come back to my point, I think that's where we local services like ours can be really nimble, and we can be really noisy and advocate for the families, because actually we really understand what's happening in Fife and what needs to change. So I can insert myself into meetings about childcare planning in Fife when I'm not wanted, and housing issues and things. as well. So I think that it is a lot, from my perspective, what I see is a lot of systems that were set up with good intentions to support families are failing them, and we work with them all in these silos and boxes actually rather than trying to join them up. So I'm not answering your question, I'm just agreeing with your point, I guess, that it's looking at the whole infrastructure surrounding the family.
Yeah, and I have 3 teenage sons who were 3 wee boys who were like 6, 7 and 8, and during the summertime, and I didn't have issues with childcare, you could see our school, and I worked in a school, and you could see all the resources that we had around our schools, which were, it was all shut up shop, and nothing was going on for people that really needed them. And we could do it during COVID, and we did it really well during lockdown. We supported families, so I don't know, and I think it is, yes, it's definitely at local level, but I do think there's an issue for in terms of infrastructure. If we want to bring parents into the workforce, and we know it's good for them, we know it's good for our families, and I hate to say it's also the lead for capitalism, and it's also the lead for the economy, so let's think about who's driving this as well. But if we're going to do that, we need to provide some infrastructure for and not just single parent families, not just families with low incomes, but it's your kind of your working poor homes we're talking about now. It is one for the SNPC.
I'll maybe start with Fiona and then come down the line of, is there, you know, do I expect you to fix the system right here, right now, but if you can, I think that'd be amazing, but is there that thing?
I think important to really think about how you join up the dots. It's all those pieces, we want all those pieces connected, so the infrastructure, having the childcare, having the transport. You talked about transport. So many of our customers, it's their big issue about getting to work. They want to work, but they've got to get a bus every day, and there isn't a bus, or it's only at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then there isn't another one for hours. So all of those things are vital to us getting that solved. So building that infrastructure that sits behind it and supports the system. Local authority funding that is joined up locally so that we don't see, which we have sadly seen, commissioning coming out of a single local authority that conflicts and duplicates. So we've got multiple services commissioning their own employability services who will all compete for the same employers' attentions. And employers, you know, you have to feel sorry for them. If you've got 6 people knocking on your door and asking for the same thing, that's really difficult to cope with. Whereas if you had one organisation coming to you and saying this really clear message, inclusive employment is what makes a difference for local people. Flexible, inclusive employers who want good work, who want positive local opportunities for people in those areas. And employers do want that. And you've got to think many employers are not big behemoths, they're not big corporations, they are small local businesses who employ local people. They are local people. One of the things we see time and time again is our customers want to start their own businesses, and one of the advantages we've been able to bring is because we work across different areas, we've been able to see how services that have worked really well in one area could benefit other areas that don't have them. And that knowledge transfer, being able to bring that across. We work here in Aberdeen. One of our customers here in Aberdeen, Wendy, she set up her own business with the support of a company called Momentic, which we bought in from another area that we'd been working and seen it work really well. And they came in and helped Wendy set up her own company. She's now getting contracts actually from Aberdeen Council, which she's really excited about. And this was somebody whose health condition made her think she'd never work. She was on 63 different tablets a day. And now she runs her own business. So thinking about that future, thinking about what we want to see, we want to see good local infrastructure that we can work with and support. We want to see employers who are inclusive, positive employers, employing those local people, but where the infrastructure is guaranteed that that will continue in the future, and that government has put a stake in the ground and said, we're going to fund this. We're going to fund this for the next year, for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years. And that you've got that guarantee over time, because otherwise we're all working in these little start-stop environments. So that's my vision.
The noise indicates that we are pretty much out of time, but I saw a couple of hands up, so I want to make sure that you get your say, and then I'll maybe give Emma you the final words off the back of them. So here and then over at the end as well.
Thanks. So I'm lucky enough to have played gingerbread based on my constituency, and I think Laurie has said 6 times a week charity, but I can tell you the impact that played gingerbread has had is anything but we see for the Girl Scout of Parts of Scotland. It's restricted to life either. I want to ask a bit more about living wage, because you've all mentioned the fact that it helps something into a low-paid job doesn't really help at all. I think the Scottish Government has done a great thing with the social resident care sector and trying to move out that sector entirely, so that whether somebody works in a council table or a private table, they should be entitled to a fair wage. It's the right thing to do, but it costs a lot of money for the Scottish Government and for local authority budgets. In a normal country, we get a lot of that money back because people would be paying less in benefits and paying more tax. The business would be paying more tax. Because we're not a normal country, the savings go to somebody else. So given that there is still that restriction on affordability, are there any other areas where the massive purchasing power of the Scottish Government and local government combined can be used to give an incentive to suppliers, providers, probably one, and to encourage more and more sectors within the economy that paying the worker a proper wage is not only the morally right thing to do, it's also most of the time economically best thing for the business as well.
Christian Arabs of Aberdeen and of Kicaden. It's a similar kind of question that will be different. First of all, thanks very much for saying good things about Aberdeen City Council. I'm one of the councillors, so I'm delighted to hear that. I'm not going to repeat the call that fellow councillors have made. You know, it's calls well made. But on the living wage, we have a problem because it's not living wage, it's Scotland. It's a real living wage. And we have a problem of how we sell it to employers. We're doing good thing in Aberdeen, and that's great. But the most important thing today is what we heard from everybody, is flexibility. And that flexibility, especially after COVID, especially for women and for men as well, because both we're all parents, we need that flexibility. We can have several employments, and that's the only way is to go through the living hours accredited employers that we have. I just checked, we only have 39 in Scotland. Can we make sure, how can we make sure that living hours accredited employers movement, can we make sure that we present it a lot better than we did with the living wage? Because competition with living wage and real living wage, and we want to put real in front of living wage. I want to put real in front of living hours as well. I want to make sure that we've got that Scottish offer, which really employers can understand a lot better. I remind everybody, we have more 0-hour contracts here in Scotland than down south. So that flexibility is needed, but we just to make sure that not only 39, but all our employers are following the right process. So if the government would check the foundation and making sure we've got an offer, a Scottish offer, which is a lot better and a lot clearer for employers and for employees.
Thank you. Just to again abuse my charge privilege record, because we did some research on this early in the year. So it's really important because, yeah, I think everyone has been really clear that, again, you see it through Job Centre Plus. Too often it's about just getting people into any old job, and it's not very well paid, and it's incredibly insecure. And we know that feels, and they find themselves just stuck in that vicious cycle. Obviously, Scottish Government power is very limited, so there's been some use of soft power around things like the business pledge. You've still not really seen business step up. The purchasing power point is really important. So again, you've seen obviously Scottish Government commit to putting things like real living wage into public sector procurement. That's incredibly important. Again, if nothing else, it's just as a marker. But actually, what the research shows is that the real world impact can be quite limited, because actually, unsurprisingly, the places that the public sector procures the most is construction, it's manufacturing, it's heavy industry. And that, again, is not surprising, because that's where the most of procurement comes from. Those are not sectors that are suffering from low pay. They are high pay because they are high skilled. Where we see suffering and low pay is in retail, it's in hospitality, areas where government doesn't really procure or doesn't procure at very high levels. So it's really interesting. Government is trying, but what you've not seen is that following through yet into the private sector, and something has to give there eventually. But that was just because we did some work on it earlier this year, I wanted to point it out. But I will give you the last word, Emma.
Yeah, I've got a few things to respond to now. Claire, what can we do? I think the culture change is needed, because the infrastructure that you're talking about excludes people because it was built by people who don't get these challenges. It was built by people who did not see women, lone parents, in skilled professional roles, and I think we can be guilty of underestimating how much that lingers and kind of overestimating progress, and that's quite a dangerous road to go down. So I think we just need to be very clear about what challenges remain, and there are people proving this wrong. There are leaders in this changing attitudes, either side of me as well. We are also taking solid steps to break down those barriers. So I think those things together will result in culture change, but it is frustratingly slow. In terms of having to trust councils, yes, we do, and I've maybe not put that in the best words, because the issue I'm having is exactly what you reflected on there, is we cannot leave child poverty up to electoral cycles. So there needs to be an agreement between government and local government as to what that priority is, and sticking to those obligations. But local delivery, absolutely, councils need to have that flexibility to be able to implement what they know works in their local areas. In terms of an independent Scotland, I would say we wouldn't tackle child poverty in an independent Scotland. We would eradicate it, because there are things we cannot do now that we could do then. We would have a minimum income guarantee. Like Peter said, you'd have spend to save. Not just because people aren't claiming benefits, but because you'd have lower poverty-related illness and other things that we know we're spending on, because people are having to rely on public services due to their extreme poverty. The security for household budgets would then, to Christian's point, mean that employers need to have an offer to people. They wouldn't get off with the same level of exploitation, because your ability to feed your children would not be based on taking up insecure work. So yeah, I think that is where the government and private sector meets, is when we manage to overhaul the system to that extent, and really put a marker down on what the acceptable standard of living is, and make sure everybody can reach it.
It's actually quite a construct line for going out when we're all canvassing round the doors about eradicating, which I'm hearing isn't.
Well, thank you very much. That was, yeah, given how long that went on for, very clearly an area of rich discussions. It's really a shame we had to finish it off. I'm conscious you've got other things you're going to need to get to, and particularly, Minister, I'm sure you need to get off to other things as well. So thank you all so much. Once again, a huge thanks to our panel, to Fiona, to Laura, and particularly to Emma, not least given you got pulled out of your portfolio comfort zone for this, but being really hugely appreciated. And yeah, and that's the discussion. So again, also a huge thank you to you. And just as a very quick trail, if you want to talk about 6 years in the future and what that silver bullet is, on Tuesday morning, hosting a fringe event with Shirley-Ann Somerville along with Steve the Children, looking at a minimum income guarantee. Sorry, not Steve the Children, that's me getting my third sector partners mixed up. Poverty Alliance and Christians Against Poverty, exploring a minimum income guarantee, which is one of those really big, exciting ideas for how we start to fundamentally shift the welfare state. So please do come along to that as well. But yeah, once again, huge thank you. And please, I'm sure there's loads left. Please take some sandwiches as you're leaving if you're peckish.